What's up, everybody? I'm Noah Khachvik. Welcome to Real Talk. First, I want to sort of apologize that I've been sort of out of commission lately. And you may notice me sort of moving my neck around quite a bit. Thursday night, I almost broke my neck, actually. I was sleepwalking. I sleepwalk when I'm stressed. It's a very stressful time in my life right now for anyone who knows what's going on with my mom. But as I'm sleepwalking, I sort of fall as I'm waking up and hit the toilet and the vanity and then the wall and then my neck at about a 90-degree angle. So that morning, of course, I still tried to go into work like an idiot and ended up going to urgent care where they immediately freaked me out by saying I'd probably broken my neck. I didn't. Even laughing still kind of hurts. So I'm like, well, I can move my, fingers. I can move my toes. What are you talking about? I obviously didn't break my neck. But I got the point is the trauma was right on top of a chronic condition I have. I live with a herniated disc in my neck from work. So it was just rough. For the last week, basically, I've barely been able to move without pain. It still hurts, but I couldn't stay away from all you guys, and here I am. So if you notice me kind of doing those, pay no attention to it. It's just because of this. I have to keep stretching and all that nonsense. Anyway, we got a pretty good show lined up. Full disclosure, Rev, who is going to be our guest, hopefully still tonight, works nights, so he has a very weird schedule. We confirmed this yesterday, but I told him it might be subject to change because of my injury. So hopefully he's still able to make it. If not, we'll sort of go over some stuff without him and continue on. But we're also going to go over Tom Riggins, our own Tom Riggins, wrote an amazing short essay that's sort of a lead up to a lot of other pieces we're going to be doing about the Communist Party USA's pre-convention discussion. And so no spoilers or anything, but we'll try to play Find the Marxism and maybe nobody will win. Anyway, we're going to get to all of that. But first, please rise for the International. Jesus, I'm sorry, guys. I'm so out of it right now. Anyway, yeah, welcome back. We're gonna start. I got a question while that was going. Moses Denton here asked what my opinion on libertarian socialism is. I think it's important not to think in these sort of brands, right? Socialism in the US or wherever it is going to be what it becomes based on the material conditions surrounding it and the progressive forces giving rise to it and giving expression to something that's already present within society, right? So, whether that's your idea of this or that doesn't really matter. What really matters is that we learn Marxism so that we understand the general laws of development and how to bring about that thing rather than sort of going on to like a dogma of we have to follow this path or that path, or you know what I mean. But great question, Moses Denton. Thank you for that. So, oh man, so painful. So painful. I apologize. I'm going to be doing that all night. This may be a short stream if I can't talk for very long, and I apologize if it is. So yeah, let's first get to so before we go into Tom's piece, we sort of need to set the stage of what Marxism is in the West. And by the way, I'm also getting updates on our guest. If he's, because of his work schedule, if he's not able to, we're going to try to find a replacement. We're still going to go over the entire, Judeo-Bolshevism mythology, which will be really fun. But yeah, so in the West, in the US specifically, we've always had a sort of theoretical problem with our Marxism. And I go into this a bit in the essay I'll have coming out in Journal of Socialism, American Socialist Studies 3, called Against the Fake Left, that I wrote with Eddie, and some more in my book on reproletarianization. But really, from the beginning, American pragmatism sort of gets us in this position where it was just more convenient to follow the Soviets, right? And so we were importing Soviet Marxism. And this left us with a lot of dogmas, right? Doing whatever the Soviets were telling us and not developing our own particular form of theory. Over time, and as sort of the ruling class begins co-opting things and trying to promote what we call the fake left, or what I think it was a CIA whistleblower, Thomas Braden, called the compatible left, trying to create this left that would sound very revolutionary, but in effect only support capitalism, right? As that happens, all the dialectics of our Marxism just sort of fade away. And so we get to this place where we're stumbling around in the dark, and we all get this sort of surface level view that maybe we think is dialectics, but as you'll see, I don't want to go into a whole thing. I repeat this kind of thing all the time. What I want to do, though, is share my screen and read this because it is absolutely amazing. All right. So this right here is Tom's first of many on the general discussion document of the CPUSA's 2024 National Convention. Now, for anyone not aware, the leadership postponed the convention last year without really telling anybody why. Though I think we can guess people might be a little scared. Anyway, so Thomas begins by saying, this is the first in a series of opinion pieces on the upcoming CPUSA convention based on the main general discussion document. It is not my claim that the positions taken by the CP leadership are not consistent with their premises. Obviously, they are. My claim, he says, is that their premises are not Marxist and or not sound. And this is the problem with all of the Western Marxism, right? Which we don't even really call Marxism. It's just the fake left. Part one, he begins saying, having postponed its mandated 2023 National Convention for a year in order to consolidate its control of the party, the current leadership has scheduled a National Convention for June 2024. Since the end of the Gus Hall era in 2000, the party leadership appears to have fallen into the hands of a right-leaning, Euro-communist, Bernstein-inspired revisionist leadership cadre that under consecutive top leaders Sam Webb, John Buchtel, and Joe Sims has followed a liquidationist policy, which he calls Webbism, which has seen the abolition of the print edition of the party newspaper and its replacement with a saccharine left liberal social democratic internet version devoid of a Marxist Leninist revolutionary working terminology, the abolition of the existing YCL and the creation of a new organization, a New York organization, more in the form of the Sims Youth than an independent YCL affiliated with the party. A turnover of the party archives, and this is big, turnover of the party archives to a bourgeois-affiliated labor library associated with New York University. The abolition of the party's theoretical journal and decline in Marxist class consciousness as reflected in party literature. Now, I want to go over this first part because it's important and you might not understand what any of this stuff means. He says that it's fallen into the hands of a right-leaning, Euro-communist, Bernstein-inspired revisionist leadership. That's a scathing criticism, right? But, it's true. Marxism-Leninism is sort of a worldview that is developmental, right? That is dialectical. Eurocommunism was this thing that, well, let's not even get into that. The whole thing is this Eurocommunist Bernstein-inspired revisionist leadership. So what he's saying is that they've revised out this core of Marxism as Bernstein tried to do, right? Bernstein was saying that they needed to revise dialectics completely, right? And realize that there are no, revolutions, that you just kind of pile reforms on top of reforms and change on top of change. And this is actually a more empiricist view. I'm sorry, my head is like floating right now. I should not have tried to do a live stream tonight. But so what this revisionism is taking the core root of Marxism out of Marxism and leaving all of the sort of terminology, right? The slogans, which they still do. And Tom's going to go on and he's going to say that Webb himself left the party to support the Democrats. Buchtel resigned as top leader and has said he no longer considers himself a Leninist, but he remains in control of the party press. Joe Sims was put in his place as a top leader or co-leader and prefers the term scientific socialism to Marxism. Although now as a putative leader of the party, he uses Marxist terminology pro forma that he had abandoned previously, meaning he didn't even try to pretend before, right? But now that he's the leader of the Communist Party, he has to at least pretend. But in anything he writes, anything he says, you can tell just reading it, listening to it, that it's not coming from a Marxist perspective, right? It's coming from this left liberal perspective, this social democratic internet version that Tom is talking about. And all of it ends up just subsuming any potential revolutionary energy that should be put to use learning Marxism, right? And trying to organize the working class independently. It subsumes this to energy towards the Democratic Party, right? And Tom will explain this as we go. Well, I need to provide some justification for the above remarks. I hope my analysis of the general discussion document the leadership has put out as a guide to the upcoming convention will do this. CPUSA conventions are usually well choreographed to end up exactly as the leadership wants, and the GDD will give a good idea of what kind of program is in store for the membership. Hint, it has something to do with making revisionism look orthodox and getting out the vote for Biden. Ain't that the truth? This, of course, is just my opinion of the post-Hall era after 50 plus years of seeing the party in action, and I could be wrong. The document opens with a general description of the effects today of the general crisis of capitalism, more or less similar to the effects that have characterized it for the last 50 or 60 years, which, that's how they present it. But our era is far more revolutionary than the ones that have come before it, we're getting to the point where finance can no longer continue on in the old way, where something has to give, right? Where it's becoming impossible for this old way for the bourgeoisie who kicked the can down the road forever and ever and ever and ever, right? It's getting impossible for them to continue doing that. Tom goes on, though. The GDD also points out that fascism is increasingly promoted as an alternative by the most reactionary sections of the billionaire class. It should be pointed out that the Marxist theory doesn't refer to a billionaire class. The class in question is a monopoly capitalist class which owns and controls the financial and industrial means of production in the U.S., i.e., the ruling class, which controls both the Republican and Democratic parties. Now, finance capital is in this period right now where profit is no longer even the primary mode of accumulation, right? It's speculation. And this has sort of propelled the decay of finance. But he keeps going. I don't want to sidetrack myself because it's not very long. We are next told the crisis has its origins in the U.S. incomplete bourgeois democratic revolution that granted freedom to those with property, but subjected those without to bonded labor, slavery, and genocide, systems of exploitation that not only contributed to the country's development, but also laid the basis for a united struggle against such exploitation. This is historically incorrect. The bourgeois democratic revolution was completed in the U.S. in the 19th century after the Civil War. That's the second revolution, right? Reconstruction. Now, I also want to explain that they don't even have the proper Marxist analysis of 1776 as an anti-colonial bourgeois revolution, right? That was its main goal, home rule. Anyway, the bourgeois democratic revolution's goal was to replace one ruling class with another, i.e., to make the capital class, the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, and replace the feudal class, which has no positive role to play in the new economic system of capitalism. At the end of the Civil War, with the downfall of the slave-owning section of the capitalists, free independent workers, not slaves or serfs, are the theoretical exploited class under capitalism, right? The industrial bourgeoisie consolidated itself as the ruling class and completed the bourgeois democratic revolution in the U.S. The political struggle today is confined within the limits of this revolution. There is, however, a higher form of democracy that Marxists are fighting for: proletarian or working class democracy, which will replace bourgeois democracy. How to conduct this fight will be determined by whether or not Marxists decide to build a revolutionary movement to bring about this higher form, or combine themselves to trying to improve by reforms the already basically completed bourgeois revolution by which the capitalist class maintains its power. Now, I was really, really inspired by this essay. And I think it's a time to really go into, well, what is the Marxist position on the 1776, right? Because all of this sort of falls out of that, this slide back into Menshevism that certain elements of the party are all in about, right? What happens when we kowtow to precisely what the ruling class wants us to do, which is either join up Republicans or Democrats, liberals or conservatives, right? What it does, especially on this right opportunist line of follow the Democrats, spend all our time, money, and energy getting Democrats elected rather than, organizing working class power. What it does is it allows them to say, well, we'll give you a few nice things in capitalism. What this does is enslaves us to those things, so they can say and hold it over your head, like, well, you don't want the evil ones in power, right? They're going to take away your nice things. But the whole point is the whole thing as a singular phenomenon is the problem, right? It's not the Democrats or Republicans. It's the relationship between the two, right? It's that getting us enslaved to um, welfare benefits or this or that, rather than fighting for what's in our interests, in which they are. I mean, let's be real. In 2024, when Biden is funding a genocide, we can't really call him a party of a lesser evil anyway. What we really need to do here is recognize why the vast majority of Americans hate their government, why most of the working class doesn't even vote, and stop allowing the ruling class and these comfortable middle class pseudo labor aristocracy to tell us, like, don't you want a few nice things in your capitalism that is killing you? And draining everything and making it impossible to even buy groceries, right? There is no lesser evil. I'm sorry, there just isn't. Give me 1 second. Hopefully we're going to have a replacement, because I was hoping to have Rev here by now at 5:30, but unfortunately it seems he's still asleep, which I may have to make this really short, guys. My neck is not... I thought I was a lot better off than I was. But anyway, let's switch gears and get into that, because hopefully we'll have a replacement for him. We'll be able to talk to him. Someone else from RTSG. Another thing we've been noticing lately, and I don't want to get into the whole thing because I'd rather talk to Tom about it, since he's going to be writing a whole series on this, and I'm going to be writing a few pieces myself. But a lot of what we're seeing right now, let's sort of switch gear to this genocide, right? If you remember, a few months ago, the entire media apparatus was saying, oh, anti-Semitism is everywhere. It's on the rise. It's on the rise, right? Anti-Semitism, all these, everyone who is against genocide is an anti-Semite and blah, 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 right? Well, they looked in the actual Palestinian solidarity movement and they could not find it, right? They couldn't find any anti-Semitism at all. And so it seems strange to me that all of these sort of JQ neo-Nazis are being boosted on social media directly after that. Now, I think that's a problem. And a lot of us do. People really underestimate the power of social media and how much time people spend on it, how people go to it for their news. And so when stuff like this happens, it really worries me. And we've been trying to sort of take the fight to them, right? These actual anti-Semites. And I believe it was Eddie posted something from our... Here, let me get rid of this one. Sorry. Eddie posted something from our Institute Twitter account, very basic, right? Saying Jewish people are not your enemy. Finance capital is your enemy. And the fake left went bananas and literally called this tweet anti-Semitism. I'm not making that up. Like, what? It's wild. Here it is right here. Let me pull it up. Jewish people are not our enemy. Finance capital is our enemy. I don't know how much more plain you can get than that, right? It doesn't matter who's Jewish and not, and all of these sort of like weird, like, basement dwelling nerds that talk about the Jewish question somehow say the same thing. They have these images where they put like Stars of David on some people and they go, but look, some of these people are Jewish. And this is, for some reason, evidence for them of a vast Jewish conspiracy, which is absolutely absurd. But Eddie literally goes, look, it's not about who's Jewish. It's about finance capital. That's our enemy. And the fake left just goes bonkers. I mean, look at some of these reply. You can delete this tweet. The anti-Semitism in these comments tells you what crowd you're playing to. And then the actual anti-Semites, who controls finance capital? Well, actually, it's mostly owned by Anglo-Saxons, But even that's not the point. It's not some weird blood quantum mumbo jumbo that's the problem. It's finance capital. It's the contradictions within this that cause our society to not be able to go on as it is going, right? I mean, we'll keep going. He says, so you're good with industrial capitalism then? Good. Yeah, that, I don't know what that means. Flighty cosmopolitan. Okay, we won't. Who runs planet? I mean, it's wild. There's like over 200 quote tweets saying how this is somehow anti-Semitism. I think that what it is, I'm sorry. Talking is really straining my neck. But I think what it is the fake left is very scared that communism is back in the US. I really do. They sort of were allowed to take our symbols and our language for decades, right? And we're here now and we're taking it back. And so they try to take anything that they can, and cancel it in some way. So if they can interpret something wrong, clearly wrong, they will, right? And that's all it is. I really, I think I'm going to go for a few more minutes, and if we don't have a replacement for Rev, I'm going to call it a night. I want to apologize to you guys. I am not in as good of condition as I thought I was. The strain that talking is putting on the back of my neck is really getting to me. I mean, I haven't even been at work for a week. Anyway, but coughing hurts. But yeah, so when they get around to this sort of thing, it really just shows you how scared they are that there's this new thing forming, right? That there's a new communist movement that they can't do anything about. And that's us, right? And so they come at us whenever they can. And they're going to keep, making up lies. They're going to keep trying to smear us. This, plays into a very weird attack that somehow, left comms and doctrinaire fascists are attacking us in the same way at the same time. It gets a lot very weird. Oh, I'm checking right now. Oh, great. Thank you so much, Mac. All right, Mac from RCSG has volunteered to fill in for Rev. So I just sent him the link to the StreamYard. Go ahead. Thank you for chatting on here, Mac. And we're going to get him in here, and we're going to go over the myth of Judeo-Bolshevism. So I'm excited about that because this thread was absolutely amazing. If one of these sort of artificially boosted Nazis comes at you with this kind of thing, go to this thread, and it's got everything you need, all the facts you need to understand what they're trying to tell you and why it's wrong, and show them why it's wrong, right? We need to take this fight to them. This is a battle in the war of positions, right? And so we need to be as informed as we can be. And RTSG has done an absolutely bang-up job on this one. If anyone's wondering who they are, they're a research connected or collective connected. Yeah, if you have a cam, that would be great, Mac, but you don't need to by any means if you don't feel comfortable, brother. It's up to you. Let me type that to him just in case he didn't know. There we go. All right. So, yeah, so they basically go through everything, and they even went back and did a part 2, right? And we're going to go through the entire thing, parts 1 and 2. And I'm hopefully going to let Mac explain how the research went on it, what they were looking at, and go over it with me so I don't have to talk as much, because I did not know this would hurt this bad. So we're just waiting for him to show up backstage. I'm gonna pull up the first one here though, because it's great. They even did a really good image for it. Check this out. Which one is it? Is it this one? Yes, it is. The myth of Jewish Bolshevism destroyed. Master thread. I love this, right? Just stepping on the capitalist, like iconic capitalist cartoons chest with a Nazi slogan on him. And we're gonna go down this as soon as Mac from RTSG gets here. But I just wanted to give you guys a preview, let you see the really cool where'd it go? Image. There it is. So yeah, a lot of the time, again, people sort of underestimate the power of the internet. And it's funny to me because, oh, here he is. All right, Mac, I'm going to bring you up, brother.
All right. Hello.
Welcome. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for being here on such short notice.
Yeah, I do apologize about Rev not being able to make it.
Not a big deal at all. I know he
yeah.
works like a really wild schedule.
Yeah, he does some crazy night shifts.
Yeah, and it's honestly mostly my fault. I told him it might be subject to change because of the injury.
Right.
And so there we go. But I really appreciate you being here with us. So if you want to introduce yourself, say who you are and a little bit about what RTSG is before we get into it, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Mac from RTSG, and RTSG is, I suppose, a research collective, we could say, in the broadest sense of the word. Currently, we mostly operate as a sort of a think tank. Our politics are mostly, well, we can say they are communist, has adjacent, quote unquote. We did not originate from IGG, but we closely work with them, and also we consider Midwestern Marx to be our friends, definitely. And we are quite international. We cover quite a bit of topics. Recently, we did a series on China, on governance of China, economics of China, Chinese socialism, and similar. Chinese associate of us actually helped us a lot with that. He primarily wrote it. So yeah, RTSG, we can say we have analysis on a lot of these topics, from theory to communism and everything in between. And I'm personally from Croatia, and I mostly deal with Soviet history. That's kind of my forte.
Very cool. Yeah, I've actually studied quite a bit of Soviet history as well. My family's from, actually, my grandfather's from Georgia, and my grandmother's from Kazakhstan. So
you're a true Soviet,
right? yeah. They actually met during the war. It was a very romantic story. But yeah, so I actually read the thing on China. It was really cool. I've been reading more and more about China lately because of how important they are right now in global communist history, you know.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thank you for that. Let's get into the Judeo-Bolshevism thing, because that seems to be really a big problem on social media right now. How do you want to set this up? Do you want to go through your thread and sort of we'll look at it and go over the basic points, or do you want to just sum it up for us and what it's really about, or how do you want to do this, brother?
Yeah. Well, listen, because this was on short notice and it's a bit late for me, and Rev and Prism and other members mostly wrote this. Obviously, I'm very, I'm clued in, absolutely. But maybe I will not do as good of a job as Rev would have. But I would like to start with kind of the context and summarize the reason why this thread was maybe necessary in the first place, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go for it, brother.
So, especially recently on Twitter, uh, there is an insane amount of open anti-Semitism and even Nazism. And when I say Nazism, we really kind of mean it in that sense, not like the leftists who just call everything fascist, and that is quite problematic. But these people are like, kind of like Azov. These guys even have the pagan stuff. Like, they don't shy away from any of it. Like, kind of Nazis with the anti-Semitic aspect in its purest form. So since that's been such a massive thing recently on Twitter, there was definitely a need to respond to it. Now, it's very interesting with these people, right? You just see they post a picture and like a bunch of people, and their pictures, and they just put David Starr next to them, and that's proof as far as they are concerned. Recently, I think. One member from our IGG made a thing where there was a picture of Haas and him and various accounts, even RTSG, and he just put David Stars next to them, basically as an April Fool, like a random, like there was a guy called like Genghis Khan or something, and it's like Genghis Khan but black, and there's like David Starr next to it, and these guys like these right wingers, they took it seriously. Like, they were, holy crap, like this proves everything. Haas is actually his name is actually Rubenstein or something,
I
etc.
remember that. It was like, proof all American communists are Jewish.
Yeah, so that was insane. And that happened recently. This happened after these threads, but these people, really, the level of evidence that they operate on is really interesting. And interesting, I mean, it's ludicrously low is what I'm trying to say. And on RTG, we really kind of pride ourselves with the amount of research and sources that we use. And maybe you've read or seen our Iran post on RTSG, and that had an insane amount of citations, like hundreds of citations. We had to make a whole other Substack just with citations for that. And I can really testify that the people who wrote that put a lot of hours into it, and all our projects try to use primary source evidence as much documentation and similar as possible, including people from the countries that the research is relevant, like this with Iran, this with China. We always have native speakers and people who understand the topic, who, as associates. So with this thread, kind of a similar thing happened. We have a lot of sources, and this does go into Soviet history specifically, not so much into the Jewish question more broadly. But the gist of it is the same. If you look at the Soviet Politburo, Soviet kind of members,
Let me interrupt you real quick, because some people may not know, what exactly are they trying to say when they say Judeo-Bolshevism, right?
Yeah. Well, the whole myth of Judeo-Bolshevism basically originates as propaganda against the Soviet Union. It originates as a sort of a myth that, these orgs, these hordes are controlled by this, cabal, and are trying to destroy the white man. And the Soviet Union is like the manifestation of that. That's like in the broadest sense how you could say what Judeo-Bolshevism is, or the myth of Judeo-Bolshevism. So, they always use the example of, like, for example, Trotsky. Trotsky is like the boogeyman. He controlled the entire Soviet Union, apparently. And and because like a few, and we really can say a few members of the Politburo were like half Jew or Jewish, like Trotsky of the original Politburo. This to them is proof that the Soviet Union was controlled by Jews. Even that statement, controlled by Jews, is insane, and the implications that it's supposed to carry are very questionable. In any case, like even if we grant that,
Yeah, I was saying that right before you came on. I mean, even if
Yeah.
they're correct, and it's all these people are all Jewish. Like, what does that even matter, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to actually prove something's happening, right?
Yeah.
And what's wild to me is that, like, it's a very low percentage of Jews in leadership for most periods of the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
right? Um, I mean, there's some areas where they were the more educated people, but even still, when we talk about sort of like the organizations within the Soviet Union, like the Bund, were arguing a lot with Stalin, with Lenin, especially regarding around the national question when Stalin was sort of laying the hammer down on the Bund and calling them reactionary. And anyway, I don't want to get you sidetracked. Let's keep going
Yeah.
on this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. I mean, then what you have to see is the actual empirical, because this stuff is tracked, right? So you need to actually empirically check the statistics of, this member was a Jew, this one wasn't, and what's the percentage of them in representation, and whether it's overrepresented on a per capita basis. So kind of what we've discovered, and what was really kind of funny, is that obviously, well, first of all, as you said, actually, we're the more educated people, so it's kind of natural that they would be slightly overrepresented. But actually, it's Lithuanians who had the most representation, as in who were the most overrepresented in parts of Soviet leadership. So maybe there was a Lithuanian conspiracy. I'm not sure, like Lithuanian Bolsheviks. I don't know, but even when it comes to the Jews alone, they were not. I mean, they were slightly overrepresented, but it is mostly corrected by, statistically speaking, when you account for their education level. It makes sense for Lithuanians also to be, or sorry, maybe it's Latvians. I do have to. It's one of the. It's either Lithuanians or Latvians. I
Yeah,
do
it's
apologize
Latvians.
for
It's
the.
Latvians.
Yeah, yeah, I apologize for the guff. But uh, Latvians and Lithuanians too, like these areas that had German influence, were richer and thus more educated. And because of that, it's logical that they would be more represented in leadership, party leadership positions. They more of them, more of the population was literate, more of them read, more of them were radicalized because of that. So it would make sense then, and as it does make sense for the Jews too, when you correct the statistics, that they would be quote unquote overrepresented.
Right. Well, and I wanted to, because this is the area we're in now, I wanted to read this part of the threat. Because after 1923, the Cheka gets turned into the OGPU, right? And the thread says, which badly needed educated people as it became a more fully fledged intelligence organization. And now this is just within the intelligence, right? Despite the fact that nearly 70% of the Jewish population was literate, compared to only 40% of Russians, Jews still made up only 15% of that leadership. They peaked at over 30% in the mid 30s due to a shortage of educated people. But
Yeah,
after the great purges, with the younger Russian generation taking over, as literacy and education levels rose among the general populace, they plummeted back to 4% of leadership. So, what we're getting at here, and what Mac's getting at, is the people in positions for which an education is necessary are the educated people. I mean, that's just common sense, right?
yeah, who would have thought?
Right. But these people, they just go, "Oh my God, some of them are Jews,"
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
whole thing. All right,
Has
go on. I'm sorry to interrupt you, brother.
Yeah,
I,
no problem. This is more or less what, but this goes into a slightly. Now we've established that when you correct for the statistics and the education level, this is not surprising at all. What's happening, the phenomenon. Sorry, but With right wingers, or I should say specifically with these types of right wingers, uh, there is this tendency to explain the world by just inserting Jews into the equation, and suddenly it all makes sense. We have a problem. Why is it happening? Um, Jews are doing it. It's literally this logical leap is so simple that it's stupid, and I'm not sure why they have a tendency to do this, but really they struggle with explaining a lot of the stuff that's happening in the world, and this seems to be the easiest cop out. And I guess that's the root of the logic of why they're even trying to explain these things with just the Jewish question mythology.
Yeah, I think there's a need to be able to have some solution that isn't communism, right? That leaves their sort of allegiance to the ruling class intact, even when they call themselves dissidents. So if it's just the Jewish part of the ruling class, you just got to get rid of the people with a certain blood quantum, and it gets more and more ridiculous. That way, I think also, there's a whole history of how that develops, but in its modern form, it lacks any real substance whatsoever, right? Like, just people being Jewish isn't enough. And someone mentioned in the chat that they even believe when people are clearly making fun of them because of this, when people started posting memes about the Irish question, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's Irish and it's the fault of the Irish. And they started getting really mad at that. But that's just like the level of dogma that they're reduced to when they just blame it all on this, because what happens is there's a sort of false metric for an answer setup, right? They're told that if all of these people are Jewish, then the problem is Jewish people. But they're never looking deeper than that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why you need facts and logic to debunk them, so to speak. Obviously, you could there's probably a bazillion examples, a gorillion, as one might say, examples of some minority being overrepresented somewhere. The problem, for them, Jews are the special ones, but why is a separate question, right? But the logic is really flawed. Absolutely, like, I don't know if you can even call it logic. It's very very primitive, honestly.
Right. And the thread that you guys did, it covers this, right? Where they talk about the overrepresentation in leadership, but they're very vague on the leadership. Right here, did I go to the wrong one? It's yeah. So neo-Nazis are usually extremely vague when they mention Bolshevik commissars, as they usually mean the government and party. But here are the facts, it says. Among full or candidate members of the Central Committee from 1917 to 1923, the highest power of the Bolshevik Party, only 17% were Jews. Of the total ruling elite of the Soviet Union, only 6%. In the Central Executive Committee in 29, Jews were neither a majority nor a plurality. So, right. What does that say? And the next tweet in the thread follows it up. That Jewish Bolshevism is laughable, right? In the Soviet government, more generally, one can simply laugh at the idea of Jewish Bolshevism or Jewish communism. It just doesn't exist. And I'm going to go into the next one, and then I'll kick it back over to you to sort of tell us what all this stuff means, because we're looking at some statistics here. Jews in majority, rare exception, not norm. Now, obviously, like you were just saying, there were moments of rare exception when Jews briefly had a majority, right? And here it's talking about in the Politburo for 3 years in the lifetime of the Soviet Union, right? But keep in mind that Politburo was beholden to the Central Committee. After 26, Jews never made up 10% of its leadership.
Yeah.
Now, the one last thing I want to say before we actually no, like let's talk about this for a minute. So basically, they're sort of just lying to us, saying, "Well, Jews controlled the Communist Party, and here's all of the numbers." They clearly didn't, right?
Yeah.
What interests me though is when they even pose this question, it automatically sets the stage for Jews being in charge of something is bad, right? Like that's a bad thing to have.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're saying here. We're saying that not only does it not matter who's Jewish and who isn't, but they're even lying about the leadership being Jewish, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Even if it was bad, it was not actually even a thing in reality. Like, so it fails on basic. Well, we can say on all fronts. What's interesting here with the statistics. Well, first of all, you're right. So the Politburo and its relation to other parts of legislative and legislative and other parts of the Soviet government is not something that these people think about, really. I mean, obviously, the Soviet structure of governance is relatively complex, or was relatively complex. So for Jews to have even like total control, and they are the ones who pass all the laws and think of them, etc. And all these laws, of course, are destroying the white race or something. Is impossible, right? Like even in these 3 years, which by the way obviously are early years, where, as we've established, there was the least amount of literate people in the party. This was some of these are basically during the civil, not basically, actually all of these are during the Civil War. Wait, 21, yeah. So it's not surprising that in this early period, especially, there was more Jews in the party. As the Soviet Union towards the mid and late 30s was becoming more and more, literacy was rapidly expanding. You had infinitely more cadets, infinitely more educated, literate people who probably were maybe even more educated than the old Bolsheviks, so to speak. It's normal that these would come to the forefront. I mean, for example, Kirov is probably the most most famous example of a younger member of the Politburo. I mean, he was assassinated later, but that's a different story. In any case, yeah. So for Jews to just to conclude, for Jews to control in a true sense the Soviet Union, they would need to have a stupid amount of representation. They would need to be overrepresented in a lot of bodies, in the Council of Ministers, in the Politburo, in the Central Committee, in the Presidium even, and not just that, but they would have to have like presumably a 50 plus majority, or maybe even more, for more important decisions. So statistically speaking, there is no reality to them controlling the legislation of the Soviet Union.
Right, and it always seemed to me that they would have to sort of prove that that Jews were specifically being put in these positions despite other qualified people, right?
Yeah.
Not that they're the only ones there and able to do the job, but that there is a concerted effort, a conspiracy to exclude everyone who isn't Jewish from this thing, right? Which clearly there wasn't. There's never been any evidence of. And a lot of it boils down to, like you said, education and literacy. I mean, my grandmother's generation was the first really literate generation in the Soviet Union, right? I mean, that's really what, like, that's why hold on one second. That's why my grandmother ended up being pro-communist, right? Because she remembered as a little girl the communists coming and teaching them how to read, and that was a big deal. But I let's go on to the next part of the thread, if that's okay with you. I just got a
Of
message
course.
that Rev is okay to hop on too, if that's good with you, and we can do a sort of
Yeah, I need to. He did not. Da, 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 da. All right. Well, he can either replace me or he can join. I need to message him. But in the meantime, we can start with the next part of the thread.
yeah. And you are welcome to stay, brother.
Thank you.
The more the merrier, the way I see it. And this is, I mean, this is y'all's project. I'm learning from it, right, rather than the other way around. So I'm very grateful to you guys for being able to be here with us to sort of explain to everybody watching what's going on with it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me
Of course.
and
All
for
right.
hosting
So
this.
let's, while we wait for Rev, let's go down to the next bit. So now we're talking about all of the Bolsheviks, right? Rather than just the party leadership. Only 5%, it says right here, were Jewish. Do you
Yeah.
want to take us through the next couple things in the tweet, Mac?
Sure. Well, here again, the correlation between the Baltic level of literacy, which was higher than the rest of the Soviet Union, is kind of shown. And here it's with Lithuanians, but also with Estonians. So yeah, it's really Latvians, Estonians, and Lithuanians are definitely. I mean, you can see here how many. So there's an insane amount of Lithuanians in the party at this time. Um, the the tweets more or less. So if we go to the next tweet again, this shows the urban population comparison. So urban people obviously are also usually more literate, especially back then. And even so, the Latvians are more represented than Jews. You know, it would be interesting to see. Like, I'm not sure. Then this argument of overrepresentation or whatever, like how does this function in view of the fact that other minorities actually had a bigger part of this? Okay, Rev just joined.
Yeah, what's up?
So,
Hey,
all right.
welcome, brother. We're live right now, so I don't know if you've been listening. Thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you still being able to be here with us after the nightmare it seems like you've been having at home today.
Yeah, it's fine. Um, yeah, this where you guys at basically?
We are just we just got over the leadership of the party, right? And we're going into the like party at large only being 5% Jewish, and how, I mean, Latvians are pretty much like the majority. If we're really going to talk about, you know, the ethnic makeup of the party, if that's super important to us for some reason, Latvians and Lithuanians are really the overrepresented communities.
Yeah, it's the Baltic conspiracy. But yeah, that's interesting. In the next tweet, or yeah, in the next parts of the thread, in the next tweets, it moves on to other topics. It goes on to, well, first of all, with Lenin. Was Lenin a Jew? No. Although, yeah, so there is
You know
that.
what's funny? You know what's funny about the Lenin being a Jew? You guys know Europa: The Last Battle? That stupid fucking documentary that people post around
Yeah,
all the time.
yeah.
So I went to their Telegram, and they themselves they fact check their own documentary, right? And they were like, "Holy shit, 1/4 of it's fake." And then one of the fake parts was Lenin being Jewish. Even they admitted it was fake in their own Telegram. Like, these people come out with the most bullshit there is. I mean, they just make up shit.
That is absolutely unreal.
One fourth of the documentary they admitted it's fake. The whole documentary is fake quotes. And
What's the name of this documentary again?
yeah,
I missed it
it's
when you said it.
basically it's called Europa: The Last Battle. It's like some like Nazi propaganda film. It's like trying to make Hitler seem like a base guy who like fought the banks or something. And basically, it uses like an assortment of quotes. It uses like some footage, of random things. Right? It's like a documentary. And they went through and they fact checked their own documentary, right? And yeah, it turns out like 1/4 of the quotes they're using is fake, straight up this fake. And that's their fact checking, right? It's obviously much higher, but even by their own admission, the whole thing's fake. Lenin's not Jewish; they made it up. Even they admit it.
And you know that meme, like, we are the CIA and we investigated ourselves, and then even that investigation leads to a quarter of it being like, it's really bad when you get to that point. Like that's critical.
Definitely.
Critical mass.
I think it reminds me of it's sort of the same thing about them saying communism is Jewish. It makes the whole thing already a foreclosed question of when they come out and say, oh no, he wasn't actually Jewish. Like, who even cares, right? Marx was Jewish, no one cares, right? But Lenin wasn't a Jew. So when they say he was, it's like a lie in two different forms, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to read this entire tweet on the thread because it's really well written. Was Lenin a Jew? No. Many point to the claim that Lenin himself, the founder of Bolshevism in the first place, was supposedly a quarter Jewish. Even if this were true, the very source used as proof for it admits that he was unaware of the fact. Wow, like that's ridiculous, right? But actually, this claim, while widespread even among the liberal establishment, is dubious and almost certainly false. This claim comes from a deliberately distorted document of his pedigree, which, ironically, Zionists picked up after the 90s. Why? Because the notion of Lenin having Jewish ancestry was unfounded throughout the entirety of the Soviet Union. So Zionists, seeking to smear the Soviets as anti-Semitic, found it convenient to team up with neo-Nazis to spread the lie that Soviet authorities covered up his real ancestry. Zionists saw this as evidence they were anti-Semitic and neo-Nazis that they were Jewish themselves, which is absurd. And you have the whole link here for this. I don't really want to, we're not going to get into now, but I do want to ask, what exactly is that link? Like, what is that? One of your sources for this, I assume?
Yeah, it goes to the
it's a Russian archive. You have to translate it, but
it's a primary source, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, here, let's just click it real quick.
I mean, yeah, you could. It should be fine.
Oh, it's for you. Yeah. Wow, and it's so wild. Like anyone can look that stuff up, right?
Yeah. Most of this, I mean, we don't really have access to unclassified information, not yet, at least. The RTG deep state needs to grow stronger for that. But and because of that, we obviously operate with public information, and a lot of it, there is a language barrier, definitely. I mean, this is from Russian, but it just takes some research. I mean, I guess that's how that works. You need to dedicate some time to the research to get to the facts. So I don't think,
yeah, it takes time and it takes work. That's why we're grateful to you guys for doing things like this and sort of going through the entire thing and showing how ridiculous it really is. And what it does is show just how absurd and easily manipulated these neo-Nazis.
Yeah, speaking of manipulated, I mean, there's even leftists on Twitter adopting this shit. Like, I saw that one account with the pamphlets. They're like, they posted some like crazy Nazi, like Jews control the world, communism, globalism shit. And they were like, yeah, we're based, and Lenin was Jewish, so was Marx. and like, I mean, they were literally spreading like some like Nazi propaganda, like straight up. Like it was actually like some insane shit. And this is like a leftist, right?
Yeah, I remember that guy, and it was a literal like Nazi propaganda image that he posted.
Yeah.
I actually responded to it, and I was like, "Dude, everyone makes mistakes, man, but you should really take this down."
Yeah, that was awful, dude. That was
I got
like,
him to though. It's gone.
yeah, that
Well done,
was
well
that
done.
was really bad.
Yeah, it was, and you know, it's like I really think he just didn't know.
And
Like,
you know what leftists do? So leftists, they'll be like, "Hey, RTSG, why does it matter if they're Jewish or not?" And it's like, dude, we're trying to approach them at their own logic, and even by their own logic, it's not real. So they either have to be an honest person themselves, or just live like an insane person, pretty much, right?
right? Well, it's like the people that started. We got swarmed by leftists when uh, we put a very basic like anti-Semitism tweet out. Jewish people are not your enemy, and they went bonkers with that, saying that was anti-Semitic. So when the actual anti-Semites and them are all attacking us at once, what does that do? No matter what they say, it turns them into allies, right? And it just reminds me a lot of what Stalin, when he said that social democracy was objectively the left wing of fascism, right? Because what it was doing was aiding that fascism in its rise by attacking the force capable of defeating it. But I want to get back to the thread here, because this next part I really liked, about the populist and peasant revolution. I like updating language. One of the things that Stalin towards the end of his life actually was studying quite a bit was the dialectics of language, and it's sort of an area I'm getting into now. And I think using sort of modern language like populism, stuff like that, is really important for regular people to understand what we're talking about. But I want to read this whole tweet and then sort of have you guys explain it if you could. The Bolsheviks were distinguished from all other revolutionary factions on the basis that they were true champions of the Russian peasant, while having their main nucleus of support initially among the factory proletariat. The peasants would come to be the strongest and most reliable base of Soviet power after the revolution. Lenin distinguished himself from Trotsky, Mensheviks, and all other factions in his notion of the democratic dictatorship of the workers and peasants. What set him apart is that he believed the workers' revolution had to be populist and majoritarian in nature. The Bolshevik Revolution did even more to cement the populist nature of the Bolsheviks when the majority of the agrarian socialist revolutionaries, the left SR faction, was absorbed in the Bolshevik government. For those who aren't aware, the SR, the Socialist Revolutionaries, split. And basically their entire left faction joined the Bolsheviks. Even the corrupt Orthodox clergy ran behind the liberal cadet party, fearing the wrath of the peasant-led Bolsheviks. Without a firm base of support among the majority rural strata, the Red Army couldn't have won the Civil War. Therefore, revolution could not possibly have been primarily Jewish, as Jews were almost non-existent among the peasantry. Now, I know this is like all framed in showing how Judeo-Bolshevism is silly, but I think this notion of majoritarianism and the people is something that a lot of the Western left forgets these days, and it's what has them allying with neo-Nazis and things of that sort. So can you sort of elaborate on this one?
What's funny is that the peasants back during this time, they were heavily accused of being extremely anti-Semitic, and I mean Trotsky, he probably won't admit this publicly, but I mean his whole childhood was him being like bullied by peasants because he was Jewish, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that carries around to his permanent revolution theory, where he's like, okay, only the proletarian can lead a revolution. we actually need to bunker down and build a big, massive militaristic state because the peasant can't build socialism, right? That's basically what, and that's how he breaks from Lenin, right? Because Lenin's like, no, the peasant is capable of socialism, right? And they actually can build socialism.
Yeah, it was basically that. I mean, once Marxist theory is out there, right? Any sort of more communal social consciousness is capable of building socialism. And he saw this in the Russian, Marx even saw this in the Russian peasantry. And Lenin calls Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution a half Menshevik theory, saying that the bourgeoisie needed to fulfill its historical role, right? But all of this is to say, very obviously, this people-led revolution wasn't a Jewish conspiracy, as there weren't many Jews there.
Yeah, and this does go, if we were to compare it to like modern day, and I'm talking about the logic of leftists and how they operate. They do still have a tendency to disregard like massive parts of population. I guess MAGA is kind of like that. Like, oh, MAGA, they're fascists, they're whatever. We cannot work with them in any like reality. This is kind of how Trotsky saw the peasants. Like he could just not, if he was an
I mean,
ideologue.
for Trotsky, he abandons the majority of the population. I mean, Russia didn't really have a proletarian like that. They were industrialized.
Yeah. Like people like Walsh would say, we cannot work with like all Republicans because they're transphobic or something. That's like 50%. Okay, we want to say 50% of the population, but 50% at least of the people who vote. So that's like millions, tens of millions, in fact, people. So
yeah, I think they get focused on the notions in individuals' heads rather than the class interests on a concrete level of entire classes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the same sort of thing Trotsky suffered from, really, where he saw the peasantry as a basket of deplorables, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting parallel, especially because Trotskyism is a big part of what passes for Marxism in the U.S. Not like the new sort of communist movement forming, but in the past, it was very predominant and even gained ground within our government, becoming neoconservatism. I have a whole essay that I never published because it's not very good on how the project for a new American century is actually the same thing as permanent revolution, because it is. It's just not a well-written essay.
I mean, there's a couple of wikis out there of Congress people who like admit they're former Trotskyists. Like I could probably post them up if you want me to.
There is.
Yeah, it's
like even in the wiki it says, yeah, I used to be a Trotskyist, and now I'm a neocon.
Well, yeah, Bill Kristol. I mean, he was one of the big ones, right?
Right. Yeah.
One of the biggest neocons, and he was a huge trot back in the day. But I don't want to get too off topic. Like, I'm in a whole lot of pain, and we got a lot to get through. So I want to go on to this next one. Did Jews support the Bolshevik Revolution? Do you want to just answer that rather than me like reading through the whole thread?
Here it is. Short answer, no. But I guess probably Rev, can you summarize this better than I can?
Essentially, a lot of Jews supported Kerensky's government, not the Bolsheviks. That's pretty much it.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, Kerensky was sort of the liberal government that took power in the February Revolution, the October Revolution, overthrew when it was becoming very evident that they were continuing the war and leading to devastation. Yeah. All right, that was it. That's a very easy one, though. Here's one that we hear all the time. Did Wall Street support the Bolsheviks? Of course not. Now, where does this one even come from?
Oof.
So the best book they have is Sutton. But Sutton makes a lot of assumptions, and from what I know, Sutton doesn't even know like hardly the difference between like a Menshevik and a Bolshevik. He conflates the two a lot in his book. The most damning evidence is Trotsky being funded by Wall Street, but I mean Trotsky was not a Bolshevik for like over a decade. He became a Bolshevik like last minute. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean,
So it's
Maybe
just
a real
from the one
problem.
book
A
from the
real
guy-
problem is Trotsky. A real problem is Trotsky.
yeah. I mean,
Not Jews.
okay. Here's the thing, right? And I pointed this out in the second thread. Sutton defends the Moscow trials where supposed international collaborators or capitalist collaborators got purged. So that would exonerate Stalin as a right. I mean,
right?
Stalin's a student of Lenin, right? So you have to draw a lineage with him too. But I mean, Trotsky became a Bolshevik literally last minute, like
Very last minute. Yeah, a few months before the revolution.
There's a good point at the end about the fact that the Soviet Union disregarded all the Tsar's debts. I mean, this is one of the biggest hurdles in like Soviet diplomacy throughout the 20s and whatever. Like Britain, the US recognized the Soviet Union in 1930s. Britain recognized in mid-1920s, and it was all because of these debts. And you would expect that Wall Street really really cares
I mean,
about their debts.
if Wall Street trickled any sort of money to Russia, it was to support Germany. But I mean, ultimately, what happened? That money's gone. It's a peasant has it now, probably. I don't know where it goes, but it's not yours no more. It's gone.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Bolsheviks didn't pay any of the old.
No. Every dime of debt was
Yeah,
gone.
yeah.
At least international debt, right? Of course, they created their own debt because they had their own new system.
Exactly.
But that was managed, right? And that was controlled through socialism. But all these aristocratic family debts, these are like gone. This is nowhere to be found.
Exactly. They said they weren't going to pay back the debts of these czarists basically that were oppressors for however long, and I think it's wild that based on the book of one guy who can't even tell the difference between a Bolshevik and Menshevik, two very different organizations. Like they just take his word for it that this is the truth. And this is what I always come back to is people just want to believe whatever verifies their preconceptions. There's no actual digging, like is very evident you guys did going through this thread, right? There's no, okay, what is the truth? Let's figure out what it is. They go, oh, this sounds like I like it. I'm going to believe that guy.
I mean, just use common sense. Is it profitable to fund a society that's going to nationalize your assets?
Right. Probably not a good investment, right?
Yeah.
No.
Good point. All right. So let's go through the next one. Bolshevik Jews assimilated and devoid of Jewish identity. I'm not sure I know what this one is about.
So a lot of neo-Nazis, they'll try to like say shit like, well, some Bolsheviks were Jewish, but they try to hide it. They were like changing their names or something. I mean, their standard for Jew is like, it's not really like fair. I mean, are they practicing? Are they praying? Are they doing Jewish traditions? Well, I mean, I haven't really found any Bolshevik who would like engage in any of that. Like, I mean, they were Marxists, right? I mean,
right. That's a good point. That's when I first heard this, it made me think of the rules for party members, right? They specifically, and it wasn't because they were anti-religion, it was because they wanted no conflicts of interest ideologically, and like sort of like conflicting loyalties, but everyone had to be an atheist who joined the party, right? If you weren't in the party, you have whatever religion you want. But if you were in the party, you had to be an atheist. And so this whole like everybody's a Jew thing just kind of doesn't make any sense on its face on that level, you know.
I mean, seriously, I would be shocked if you can find me one prominent Bolshevik who was like practicing Judaism. I mean, that's like I haven't seen any evidence of that. Like seriously, none. Like maybe some for Christianity, but Judaism, no. Like that's no.
Yeah, later on, the ties with the Orthodox Church got pretty strong. But yeah, it's just so bizarre to me that that kind of thing happen, or can just like get believed. It's wild to me. Anyway, so let's keep going on because I really am going to have to cut this short tonight. I apologize, but I'm in a whole lot of pain. Zionists fought for the counter-revolutionary White Army, shot by the Cheka. Here we go. Russian Tsar depended on Jewish capital. So did whites. The picture becomes even more striking, you say, when you realize that under the based Russian Tsar, Nicholas II, which that's kind of how a lot of these weird neo-Nazis refer to the Tsar, Nicholas II, Russia's industrial economy depended heavily on, quote, Jewish capital, according to the Minister of Finance. The situation was so acute, the ministers under the provisional government admitted that without it, there would be no trade or industry at all. We find some of the first funds for the White Army came from the Jewish bourgeoisie. In Tomsk, Jewish capitalists spent several million rubles to support the whites. Jewish capitalists, like all capitalists, wanted to protect their position against the Bolsheviks, who industrialized the country in a way that overwhelmingly put the Russian peasant majority in power. Now, this is really only important because they all talk about how against Jews they are, but it seems that they're fine with them in history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I thought that one was rather telling, that it's really just based on whatever narrative sounds.
Yeah, again, for this, we're just using their own logic against them. Like,
exactly.
Oh, if you're funded by Jews, you're bad. You're a capitalist. Well, what about the government before them? They were funded by Jews.
Yeah, it goes back to class interests,
right?
Which is obvious.
Well, and they always bring up the Rothschilds. And the problem with the Rothschilds isn't that they're Jewish; it's that they're British.
Of course.
Sorry, that's a bad joke.
No, it's good. It's good. The Anglos are, yeah.
Yeah. So, is there any specific parts of this you really want to get to, Rav or Mac?
I'd say the initial statistics of the representation of the Jews as like the rawest and the most obvious example of how the Jews did not control, the Soviet state are probably the most striking. They're it's like, here are the statistics, this is the reality, and most of it already falls apart just based on that point.
I would like to add, because this is recent to current events, Zionists got disappeared in the Soviet Union. They either got deported or sent away somewhere else to a gulag or something.
Yeah.
So
there seems to be this very weird myth that Stalin was a Zionist, which is strange because you can read some of his most basic texts that everyone tells you, if you're going to read Stalin, read the national question stuff, right? In that, he's talking about the reactionary nature of Zionism and how the Bund within the Soviet Union is trending towards this reactionary stance and Zionism, and it's a problem. So I don't know where that one comes from either,
Yeah, I think it comes from probably Soviet post-war policy on Palestine and
Israel. It also comes from leftists trying to attack the Soviet Union in any way they can. And yeah, they have an assortment of lies that they throw.
All right, I'm gonna wrap up the thread with your conclusion because it's very good. Claims that, quote, Jews were behind the Bolsheviks completely ignores basic facts of the circumstances by which Bolsheviks got to power. While Jews did have a relatively disproportionate presence among Bolsheviks relative to their population, this was not because they were Jewish, but because they, like Latvians, who were even more overrepresented, had higher per capita literacy and education rates, being mostly urban, professional, and middle class. And even then, Bolshevism was distinguished from other Marxist parties by the fact that it had far less Jewish representation in general. The fact that Bolsheviks led the revolution proves the revolution wasn't Jewish. It was a popular revolution supported by the overwhelming majority. We see further Jewish representation in Soviet government completely plummet after Stalin's Great Purges, which should have buried this stupid meme forever. But it did not stop the Nazi liars from continuing to knowingly lie and still claim Jews controlled the Soviet government. This was pure war propaganda with no basis in fact, intended to justify their colonial project of rape, plunder, and massacre against the Soviet people. Nazi propaganda is the main source of why people today claim that world communism is Jewish. It has no basis in reality, especially not after 1939. Neo-Nazis are the reason this lie has begun to resurface, and upon minimal scrutiny, it collapses. Be vigilant of anything these liars say. And I love this. I'm not gonna, swear.
I would like to add.
Yeah.
Hitler himself says, "Yeah, I don't even think Stalin's Jewish. Stalin's not even Jewish to me." I mean, yeah. I mean, so some of the people that were Nazis in power, like Walter Funk, who's like one of their top like financier guys. I was reading some of his like testimony, and he was like, I thought the anti-Semitism shit was like a meme. Like he basically pretty much says it. I thought it was like a meme. Like I didn't actually believe it. So I don't know, man. Like I mean, Hitler himself says Stalin was not Jewish, so I don't know why Wignats on Twitter is saying it.
You know what that reminds me of?
Well, they'll say just about anything.
Yeah, like when Kotkin, there's an interview between Kotkin and Zizek, and Kotkin is one prominent liberal historian on the Soviet Union, and he talks about how when they opened the archives in the 90s, all these liberal historians were like, okay, let's see like what they really were thinking about.
Yeah, we're finally gonna find out behind closed doors.
Like what's and in reality, yeah, they really did talk about what they spoke in public. But with Nazis, it's like half of them were like, okay, guys, I mean, we don't really believe in this, or do we? And then they join the party and they see like someone like fucking Goebbels or oh my god, what's his name? The craziest one.
Goebbels?
Yeah, Goebbels and the paganism and the crazy like schizo things that they talk about, and they're almost like, hold
right
on.
Here. So this is from Funk, right? Again, it's like a top financier of the government, German government. He's like, I was never anti-Semitic on the basis of racial principles. At first, I thought that the anti-Semitic demands of the party program were a matter of propaganda.
Yeah.
He thought it was just like a meme to get popular. He actually didn't even believe it. And this is the guy running their finances. So I mean,
I was thinking of Himmler.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Nazi propaganda, they'll throw whatever they got at you, completely swindle people and just bullshit around all day.
Unreal. Well, thank you for coming on and talking about this. I just posted a link to the follow-up thread you guys did, a part 2 of this one. So anyone looking for more information on the Judeo-Bolshevism theory, check that one out as well. I'm gonna sign out here in a minute, but is there anything before you guys go that you want to plug or you got going on before you go?
Rev, you want to go first?
I would just say, just subscribe to our Substack. Honestly, go find us there.
Absolutely, and we'll put a link to the RTSG Substack in the comments to the video once it's up.
Yeah, absolutely. Our Substack, that's the main thing now. We have a lot of big projects in the works. I plan on publishing something pretty big pretty soon. Rev,
very good. This is like when he's about to post some scholarly shit. Like this is like crazy crazy nuclear.
Yeah, it's been in the works for, we can say, years by now, and which is slightly concerning, but oh well, it has to be done. And indeed, I genuinely believe this, and I think what we showed today is that, like, the level of research and, you know, the is almost manic, like the depth into which we go, and that's the standard that we want to upkeep with RTSG. And yeah, Substack, absolutely, and yeah, just keep an eye out.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I have a few questions I'm going to answer, so I'm gonna set you backstage. But thank you, Reb, especially thank you for showing up, even though you have some huge emergencies going on at home today. And Mac for being able to come and fill in on short notice. Thank you. This was amazing. I'm very happy we were able to do this. Thank you both. We got a lot of great stuff done today.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, have a good night, brothers. We'll see you later. All right. So you're back to just me, unfortunately, right? That was good. They do some really, really good work at RTSG. We're going to I'll make sure I put a link to their Substack in the comments when we're done with this. I saw a few comments, but you know, there were some trolling ones like aren't, where is it? I can't even find it. I don't even care. I'm in a lot of pain. All right, I'm gonna go. So we'll go out the same way we always do. Thank y'all so much for being with us tonight. We will see you next time.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In a world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. And so begins the final drama, in the streets and in the fields. We stand unbowed before their armor, we defy their guns and shields. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from